Hello, welcome or welcome back. My name is Ari, and this week's book box is the My YA Book Club book box. I think the name doesn't really matter because this book box doesn't exist anymore. I just have some books that I need to get off my backlist. I subscribed to this book box for 9 months back in 2019 and early 2020. And I made a video about it, which I will stick up in the cards here, when for like 2 or 3 months straight, I just didn't get a book box. I was still paying for it, but I didn't get anything in the mail. So I made like this rant video complaining about it. Spoilers for that video. Turns out the guy had shut the book box down because I guess he wasn't making any money from it, whatever. And after I emailed him, he refunded me and then sent me like one final box. So what came in this book box was every month you would get 2 young adult books, and that's pretty much it. There was supposedly like a ebook, but I never got an ebook out of any of it. That doesn't matter to me because it was $13.50 a month. Like, yeah, that's it. I paid $13.50 a month and got 2 hardback young adult books. Have I heard of any of the books that I got? No. Have I really liked any of the books that I got? No. But I did subscribe to this when I very first started creating content for Instagram and YouTube, and I just didn't have a owned TBR. So I subscribed to this because it was very cheap, and then I would just get 2 new books each month. So I could build up a TBR where it quickly got out of hand. And now I'm trying to get rid of this giant TBR that I don't want because I was stupid and impressionable all of 2 years ago. So out of the 18 books that I would have received over 9 months, I have 7 left. So less than half. That's pretty decent, honestly. So I want to read a minimum of 3 of these this month. I don't want to burn myself out like I did last month, where I was just reading a bunch of books that I hated, because I don't really particularly feel like I'm going to love any of these books. So I'm going to start with 3, and then if I hate all 3 of those, then I'll probably stop and then read the remaining 4 sometime else. But minimum of 3. I'm gonna put this down because this is really fucking heavy. Anyway, the first one that I'm for sure reading is going to be The Glasstown Game by Katherine Valente, because this is on my Dungeons and Books TBR for this month, so I need to read this. This is also the book that I picked for the Book Covered Book Club, because it's got an illustrated cover, even though I think all of the ones that I'm going to be reading out of this stack are illustrated cover. So this one is 100% one of the 3. We will put it right there. Now, out of the remaining books I have, like my first priority this month, it should be AAPI authors, because, you know, it's Asian and Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So you want to read books by Asian and Asian Pacific Islander folks, right? All of these people are white. So that doesn't help me in any way at all, but I have divided these into kind of subcategories. So out of these 2 books are the ones that seem the most interesting to me, right? This is Radiant Road, or The Radiant Road in Illusionarium by Heather Dixon and Catherine Catmull. So these are like the most just like generic fantasy books in this list. So out of these 2, I am going to read Illusionarium. Just randomly decided to grab that one. No rhyme or reason, it just sounds like one of the 2 better ones. And then these 2 are the ones that I want to read the least. This is about a cop shooting a young boy, which normally I would say is a very appropriate thing to read right now, but it's by a white guy. So, And then this one, I mean, do I really have to explain why this sounds stupid? So I'm going to go with this one, and expect not to like it. Now, the other two books, which are Dark Souls and The Devil in Ohio, are both kind of like a mediocre. If I decide to read a fourth book, it will be one of those two. If I don't decide to read a fourth book, then I'm not going to read either of those two. And then these four will just continue to live on my TBR. So this is our starting place. I am starting with this one since this one is actually on like a different TBR and not just for this video. I'm gonna start with this one. It's also the chunkiest. It also sounds really stupid, and just for transparency's sake, I am allowing myself to DNF these books if they're that bad. So I'm gonna try to get through them if I possibly can, but if they're really just like, I hate everything about this, I'm not afraid to DNF this stuff. These things were cheap. I just want them off of my shelf. So I will check in with you once I finish this. So I didn't feel like recording at all for a couple of days, so I have all three books to talk about at once. So the first book that I read was Glasstown Game by Katherine Valente. I DNF'd this. This was awful. This follows the three Bronte sisters, like the author Bronte sisters, and their brother Branwell. And I understand that this was set in the 19th century, right? So at the time, women or girls were kind of useless to a family. Like, boys were the only ones who could inherit. Women were just in existence to be married off. But in a children's book written in 2017, I do not need to read every single fucking word coming out of Branwell Bronte's mouth about how he is better and more important to his sisters as a boy. Like, it was completely unnecessary. Like, I'm fine, mention it once, twice even, give the children the idea that, hey, yeah, sexism was really bad back then, but literally every single time he opens his mouth, he in some way insinuates that he is better or more important than his sisters. And you know what? I even know as an adult that I've never fucking heard of Branwell Bronte, and I've heard of all of his sisters, so at some point in this book they probably prove that he's not that fucking important. Still don't want to read it every time he opens his mouth, so I was like, okay, I'm done with this, bye. Next up, I read Illusionarium, and I actually kind of liked this one. This is like a high 3-star, like a 3.5 if I were to do half stars. This one's going to be kind of harder to describe, like, what the plot of this book is. I didn't even describe the plot of that book, but the children make up their own fairyland. Whatever. The plot of this book, steampunk London, but there's magic, and the magic's illusion magic, and you have to, like, smell some gas in order to do the illusion magic. And that gas, like, fucks you up, like, physically. There's also a plague that only kills women, and alternate realities. So it's very different. Not something that I've ever really come across readings before. Not that I read a whole lot of steampunk, so maybe this is something that's completely done a lot in steampunk and I've just never come across it before. But it was kind of interesting. Now, there were things that I didn't particularly like about this. One of the things that really bothered me, this book is told from Jonathan's perspective, and it is, Jonathan has already had this adventure and he's going back and, like, writing about his perspective, and he, I don't know if this is focusing, he, like, put footnotes on shit. And you know what would really pull me out of a story and make it definitely, so I know you were telling me and not showing, is putting fucking footnotes. And especially footnotes like this, because it's just like, I wasn't sad about my sister getting sick. And then the footnote is like, really? And then like the next one is like, no, really, I wasn't crying. And it's like, this is completely fucking unnecessary. And it really, every time, there's not like a huge amount of footnotes, but every time one would be there, it would just instantly pull me out of the story. That might not bother other people, but it sure as shit bothered me. The characters are a little bit like two-dimensional in here. It's not the worst thing I ever read, and I do have to say that overall I enjoyed this book, but it is very obviously a book made for young adults and not adults. So, okay, not something that I'm like gonna shout across the rooftops that you should go out and get and buy, but if it's something you already have or something that sounds like extremely interesting to you because you love steampunk, then I'm not gonna say like, don't read this. And the final book that I've read so far is Texting the Underworld by Ellen Borum. I don't know how to say her last name. Anyway, this book follows a young boy of Irish descent who lives in Boston, and he discovers the family banshee. So he's not supposed to see her, but she's not very good at being a banshee, and she kind of like becomes friends with him. And he knows somebody in his family is going to die because she is the family banshee. She only wails for the O'Neills, I think is his last name. Yeah, O'Neills. She only wails for the O'Neills, so he knows an O'Neill is going to die, but he doesn't know who it is. And this story is basically like his adventures with the banshee and then trying to figure out how to like stop somebody he loves from dying. So it's supposed to deal with grief, I think. I just don't think it does a very good job of it, which I will get to in just a second. One of the things this book has is one of the young adult tropes that I hate the absolute most, and that is the like absentee parents or bad parents trope, where these 12-year-olds, 10 to 12-year-olds in this case, are doing shit that they definitely 100% should not be doing as 12-year-olds. These kids like go to the underworld at 12 years of age. Where are their parents? What the fuck are these kids' parents doing? Also, they've got like girlfriends. Like, who has a girlfriend at 12? Like, I'm horrified by all of this. But I hate that like bad parents trope. And even like their grandfather like encourages them to do a lot of this shit. And it's just like the grandfather is encouraging Connor to do shit that he should not be doing at 12 years old instead of like being a fucking adult. And I hate when adults don't act like adults. Like, I hate it. So, did not like that trope. Also, like, this is spoilery, but I'm gonna say this is like, I gave this a 3-star, but it's like a 2.5. Really, it's like very, very low end of 3-star, but not quite 2-star. And the problem that I have with this, or the spoily part anyway, is that Connor gets the ability to choose who in his family is going to die. And I think that is very irresponsible and potentially traumatic for a 10 to 12-year-old child to think through this fantasy world that they can prevent like somebody's death by choosing somebody else to die. And it just seems like that's like a horrible thing. And it's the It's a horrible thing for a child, I think, to go through. And it didn't come across as like written very well. Basically, his grandfather just keeps insisting, it's like, you need to choose me, you have to kill me. And like can you imagine, even as an adult, like having to choose your grandfather to die in order for somebody else in your family to live? That's like horrific enough as an adult, but like as like a 10 or 12-year-old, like, oh my god. I'm not okay with this. The other thing in this book that I don't know that's handled well, but I think this should be left more to an own voices review. I'm going to tell you about it, but I could be very wrong, is Connor comes off across in the book as autistic, and he is very obsessed with maps and knowing exactly like his exact coordinates on a map and how many like and how far away he is from something else, where he'll be like, I am 2,000 feet from this landmark, or I'm exactly 1.2 miles from this landmark. And he's just very, very like overly reliant on knowing his exact location, which is something that you see in autistic people, but it's never said like directly in this book that he is autistic, right? So just displaying autistic tendencies without necessarily being labeled as autistic. And I'm not a doctor or anything, so I could be completely wrong about that, but in own voices, things that I have read about autism, I have seen similar things. So towards the end of the book, after he decides to kill his grandfather, there's like this mention about how because he had to make this decision, he is somehow growing out of his autistic tendencies. And it just feels like icky to me, saying that autistic, like being autistic is something you could or should change about somebody. So I really did not like how that was handled, even if he wasn't specifically stated as autistic in the book, if that makes sense. So now that I've finished those, I do have time to read more books. It is Wednesday, and this video doesn't go up until like next Tuesday, so I have 6 days. But I really have absolutely no desire right now to read any more young adult books. Like, I am going to burn myself out if I continue to read young adult right now. So I am going to read some other things, and I haven't decided yet if I'm going to come back and read anything else from this book box. I may not. Like, I really have not decided right now, but I need to get some adult books in before I decide. So I am going to come back in like seconds for you, but it's going to be days for me, and then let you know either here's some more books or it's the wrap up. So I don't know which one I'm doing right now, but you know which one I'm doing right now. So I did not read any more books from this book box. I'm realizing that the older I get, the more I struggle with bad parenting in young adult novels, and I just wasn't motivated to read any other books out of this box. I still have 4 left, right? I still have 4 left. I will probably get to all 4 of them by the end of this year. They're just not like a huge priority for me right now. So that's it. That's all I'm talking about this month. I did read other stuff this week, just nothing from this book box. So let me know down in the comments what you thought about the books that I've read. If you watched my mid-month wrap-up and guessed the star ratings that I gave to books, let me know if you got any of those right down in the comments. Next week I am talking about Book of the Month Club, so a book box everybody's heard of, a lot more choice in what you're receiving in that box. But I will see you for that video next Tuesday. Bye.